We may not be able to do that, but what we're going to do is we're going to show you a video tonight. We've got another one of our Methuselah Factor videos queued up, and I'll just give you a little background without putting any slides up. So I think most of you realize, if you've been with us before, that I'm the author of the book, The Methuselah Factor, and you can see the subtitle there, Learn How to Live Sharper, Leaner, Longer, and Better in 30 Days or Less. And what we did is, in addition to the book, we came out with a series of videos. And those videos are designed to walk you through the key elements of the Methuselah Factor approach, which is a 30-day program where roughly in about 6.5 minutes a day, you can watch a video, or if you've got the book, you can read the chapter in the book, which actually has more material than the videos do. But we've been putting these videos out over the course of the last month or so, maybe a little bit more since the beginning of the summer. And so what are we, really 2 months we've been putting those out? And many of you have been watching those videos. So we've started to pull those videos, the early ones, down off the platform, because the goal was to try to incentivize you to go through those videos as part of a 30-day or extended summer lifestyle program. So 30 different lessons over the course of the summer. So we're going to continue to put out free lessons. We're going to show you another one tonight. If you missed some of the earlier ones, if you want to have access to these videos for as long as you like them, if you go to my website, which is simply compasshealth.net, so compass like giving you direction, health like not being sick.net, we have extended the special pricing on the digital download. So that means you could download all 30 of the videos, have them on your computer, on your phone, you know, wherever you'd like them. And you can watch those, you can watch them with others. You can even use them in group settings. So there's no viewing fees on any of my materials. So free to use, and regardless of the number of people watching. So we've continued that special price for about another week. You can also buy a hard copy of the DVDs. It's 4 DVDs that have the whole series. Those are due out in a few weeks. So a couple of you won gifts that included that DVD. You'll be getting that shipped somewhere toward the end of the month. And others of you, if you've purchased them, those DVDs will be shipping then. So we're putting up the videos, though, free. Like I said, those of you who've been with the program from the beginning, you've had a chance to watch all those videos. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, Compass Health Consulting, if you want to get the extra videos. We're putting out usually 1 or 2 additional videos per week, in addition to what we show on Tuesday nights. So with that background, we're going to show you night number, or day 19, along with this program. My son Victor has got that queued up. So we're going to see if we can pull this off as smoothly as Ronnie's been doing it every week. We've already realized that we're not pulling off the screen sharing as well as he did it. So Victor, why don't you go ahead and see if you can get day number 19 running for us. Welcome back. Dr. David DeRose here with the Methuselah Factor, 30 Days to Better Health. We're on day 19. Your challenge today is to go green. Now, I know a lot of times when people hear that, they say, well, that's the environment. You just talked about that yesterday. No, today's go green is talking about eating more greens, more plant foods, more green leafy vegetables. You've got 2 challenges today, 2 ways to accomplish it. One is just to do simply that. Make a goal to eating more green leafy vegetables. But the second way to do it is to go on a special fast. I'll tell you about both those options in more detail. But first, I have to contrast 2 stories. The first one is a common scenario. Patients who've come into my office over the years, some of them very concerned about the environment, about natural remedies. And as I talk to them about their lifestyle, they may have brought into my office a big bag, and they dump the bag out, and it's full of supplements, all kinds of natural supplements. Are they helping themselves? Hurting themselves? Well, I wish I could tell you that everything sold as a natural supplement was beneficial. Some things that may help you in one area can hurt you in another. For example, there's medical research suggesting that ginseng, certain types of ginseng at least, may help your blood sugar, but that very same ginseng may raise your blood pressure. There's evidence suggesting, for example, that St. John's wort may help you with your mood, might help with depression, but it may raise your blood pressure. So really medicating yourself with supplements is a dangerous proposition. With that in mind, let me tell you the story of my grandfather, Santo. Santo grew up in Italy. And growing up there, he was eating lots of plant foods. Now, I'm convinced that Santo never took an anthocyanin supplement, nor did he probably ever hear of anthocyanins. But in spite of not knowing anything about anthocyanins, nor going to any health food store and taking this supplement, he was getting the benefit from anthocyanins. Now, I think you're connecting the dots. By eating those plants like tomatoes, like onions, garlic, anthocyanin-rich foods, he was getting these powerful hemorheology-enhancing compounds. That's right, we've talked about it before. Anthocyanins are one class of phytochemicals that make your platelets less sticky and make your blood more fluid. Here's the interesting thing. There's whole classes of plant foods that actually have been demonstrated to have blood fluidity enhancing effects. Quercetin is a compound found in many plant foods. So as you increase your plant foods, you get more quercetin, and this compound helps with blood fluidity. Resveratrol, for example, found in grapes. Eat more grapes, and what do? You up your intake of resveratrol. It too helps with blood fluidity. Garlic has compounds in addition to the anthocyanins that help with blood fluidity. And if that's not enough, nitrate-rich plants like green leafy vegetables have unique benefits in enhancing blood fluidity. So if you're serious about your Methuselah Factor, you want to take seriously my challenge today to go green, up your intake of green leafy vegetables and plant foods. How do you do it? Set a goal. Say every day, I'm going to commit to eating a full cup of green leafy vegetables. Maybe that's your goal. If you're eating zero in the way of green leafy vegetables, maybe just having half a cup every other day is going to be your goal. But remember, I want to challenge you to be bold. Now, some years ago, we knew a young lady. She would not eat vegetables at all. She would not eat many fruits even. She was clearly in the meat and potato department, but leaving off the potatoes. You get the picture? How are you going to get somebody like that to dramatically increase their intake of green leafy vegetables? Well, here's what I suggest. If it's just too much to think of stomaching vegetables every day or most days of the week, you have another way that you can go green. I'll allow you to go on the leaf, stem, and flower fast. It's one of my all-time fasts. As far as putting patients on fast, I really enjoy this fast because there's a margin of protection. You're allowing people to eat what we call low glycemic index foods, foods that do not tend to raise blood sugar. What are we talking about? Leaf, stem, and flower foods. We're talking about leafy vegetables like kale, like collards, like lettuce, like spinach. You get the picture? We're talking about stem and flower vegetables like celery, like asparagus, like cauliflower, like broccoli. You get the picture, right? So you can eat any of these foods, and we say one day a week. If you're going on the leaf, stem, or flower fast, one day a week, you can eat any of those foods. You can juice them. And granted, they're not very palatable juiced. You can steam them. You can eat them raw. That day, it's just leaf, stem, flower fast. You say, Dr. DeRose, I hate this stuff. I could tolerate celery. Well, maybe that's all you're going to eat for the day, is just celery. Now you say, could this be dangerous? Well, it could be if you're on medication for blood sugar, if you're on medication
for blood pressure. In fact, some of the blood pressure drugs can raise potassium levels, and you'd be getting a lot of potassium in those fruits and vegetables. So here's the bottom line. If you have questions about the safety of such a practice, definitely, like I've been encouraging you in this series, talk with your primary care provider. If you've got kidney issues, definitely, this is not a diet that you want to go on. You don't want to ramp up your plant food consumption. You can get into big trouble. Talk with your renal dietitian or your nephrologist if you're trying to see if you can safely incorporate some additional plant foods. If you got the picture, green leafy vegetables and other plant foods, important powerhouses when it comes to improving your blood fluidity. Your challenge for the rest of the program, eat more of them. If you can't do it on a daily or almost daily basis, then try that leaf, stem, or flower fast once a week. I'm Dr. David DeRose. Go green. That's the message today. You're on a path to better blood fluidity and better health.
Well, it is good to be back with you. And we've got a few minutes. If you had some questions about what we discussed in that presentation, those of you that are on Zoom, we can actually take any questions that you might have. I know others are on YouTube and Facebook. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to see your comments, at least not in real time on either YouTube or on Facebook. But any of you have any questions about what we presented this evening? So just maybe a little bit more background I'll share with you about this leaf, stem, and flower fast. I was working at a health center where we were doing a lot with diabetes. And one of the concerns, of course, when you put someone on a total fast is that they could get in trouble with their electrolytes, their blood minerals. Also, individuals who have digestive health issues, if they're prone to gastritis, which is an irritation of the stomach lining, or if they're prone to ulcers, either one of those situations actually can be very problematic if they're not eating. So we found that using this leaf, stem, and flower fast gives many of the same benefits as a total fast with a margin of protection as far as electrolytes, allows you to eat, and just really worked very well for many people. Even having said that, if you didn't pick up on this, either in this particular video or in others that we've shown, if you're making dramatic changes in your lifestyle, you definitely want to be speaking with your healthcare provider. For example, if you have diabetes and you make a dramatic change in your intake of caloric foods, in other words, you go on this leaf, stem, or flower fast, you may need, even just for a day, you may need to adjust your insulin levels. So we tell people, talk with your doctor if you're going to do something dramatic like a fast or modified fast, especially if you're on medications, okay? If you're otherwise healthy, and to go on the leaf, stem, or flower fast, I've never seen a problem with it. But if you are on medications, definitely talk with your healthcare provider or your pharmacist at least as an initial step. Make sure that you're not going to mess up how that drug affects your body. If you've got other questions, we'll be tackling those at 8 o'clock. So that's when we take any of your questions. We're going to be talking about the video approach, the Methuselah Factor program. And by the way, just because we showed day 19 of the program, if you've been reading the book, and if you're just joining us, we're speaking about the book, The Methuselah Factor, which is what those videos were designed to go along with. So if you've either been reading the book or you've been watching the videos and you have any questions, or you have some success stories that you want to share, we'll give you a chance to do that at 8 o'clock. So from 7 to 7:20, our feature is on the health components that we have presented in the Methuselah Factor diet and lifestyle program in the book and in the videos. And then at 7:20, we segue to the topic of spiritual health and how that interfaces. And tonight, I think it's a really close connection. Ronnie bailed me out, I think, again tonight. So we're going to try to share the screen again. We didn't do too good a job doing that earlier, but we found out what the problem is, we think. So let's try this now. And I'm trying to share my screen without having this endless loop that we experienced. And that is working much better right now. So let's enlarge this for you. So my son looked at this and he said, this is a very retro look. And whether you think it's a retro look or not, we're trying to help you reconnect with things that people have known about for many years. We talked first about fasting from food, and we're going to transition to talk about fasting from work. Some of you are learning too much about that. You've been laid off because of COVID-19, but we want to talk about some positive things in this regard. So these were the slides that I was going to show you earlier, but I walked you through this material, and there's contact information if you're wanting to get the resources and are having trouble with the website, victor.derose@yahoo.com, or calling him directly at 580-504-7042. Victor can help you with any of your questions about our resources. And we do have a number of books and videos and other things that we're not featuring in this series. Okay, so tonight we're talking now in this segment about fasting from work. And this is based on nights number 7 and number 8 of Pastor John Bradshaw's series, Hope Awakens. He called it the blessing of rest. So we spoke about resting your intestines, resting your pancreas from eating all those carbohydrates and going on the least stem and flour fast. Now we're going to speak about some other forms of rest. And if you want to see more fully what Pastor Bradshaw presented, a lot more material than we'll be able to cover, but you can go to hopeawakens.com. Remember, nights 7 and 8 of his series. Or if you just want more health information and you want it from a little different perspective than I've been sharing it, an excellent approach, Take Charge of Your Health by Pastor Bradshaw with a variety of health experts. He gave me the privilege of chiming in on one of the episodes when we were speaking about weight loss, actually. But you can go see all those videos at takecharge.life. So those are all freely available for you. Now, one of the people that Pastor Bradshaw interviewed was Roger Schwelt. Dr. Schwelt, physician, I feel he's one of the most credible voices when it comes to COVID-19 today. I am shocked. I'll just be honest with you. I'm shocked about how much nonsense is out there, even from people with letters after their names like PhD and MD. And I'm sure some people are shocked by what they've heard me say, someone who has an MD and an MPH after his name. But that being said, Roger Schwelt is just logically consistent, presenting things, not contradicting himself in his presentations. Everyone, I'm saying this, just looked at like 3 of these different videos that people are sharing with me. What do you think of this, Dr. DeRose? Is this untrue? Every one of them, and they're all professionals, they're all contradicting themselves. I mean, right within the program, anyone with any medical background or just using common sense would say, did I hear right? You just said one thing. You just said that COVID-19 is very innocuous. There's all these people getting it and hardly anyone's dying, just such a small percentage. And then the next thing out of their mouth is they're saying there's all these people that have COVID-19 that don't have it at all. And I'm thinking to myself, do you understand what you're just saying? You're trying to say you can't trust the media, but what you just showed is we can't trust you, because you're saying the death rate is very low. That means you're accepting the rates of the numbers of people affected and saying very small percentages are killed. And the next words out of your mouth, you're saying all these numbers are just inflated, that not really that many people are even affected with COVID-19. Are you following along what the contradiction is? And there's so many people out there that are just spewing a bunch of nonsense. Doesn't even make sense when you actually hold it up to common logic. Schwelt has managed, from my perspective, to do an amazing job of looking at sound science, pulling in natural remedies. And he's an intensive care specialist. He's treating COVID-19 patients. He's not some bureaucrat or some teacher who's not actually seeing patients. So if you really want a good source, his website is called medcram.com, and I get no commission from people that visit his site, okay? So just trying to point you some good information when it comes to COVID-19. Anyway, Pastor Bradshaw had him talking about sleep because he's also a sleep medicine specialist. He's a lung specialist, an intensive care medicine specialist, and a sleep specialist. You say, how could anyone do all those things? Often the lung specialists end up, some of them, in intensive care because they've got to work the respirators, and they end up in sleep medicine because a lot of the sleep medicine is things like obstructive sleep apnea, which could be defined as a respiratory problem. Anyway, so Schwelt is speaking about problems with not getting enough rest. And we've known about this for years, but I thought it was great to hear him say this on this widely circulated series. If you're cutting yourself short on sleep, what we know is you're raising your blood sugar and you are raising your blood pressure, because the way your body compensates for lack of sleep is it ramps up stress hormones. So lack of rest is a real problem. It does increase your risk of heart attack and stroke as well. And it undermines your immune system. We've been hearing about this lately. So getting adequate rest is very important. Now, some of you are saying, well, this is just stressing me out even more because I don't sleep well to begin with. I have insomnia. Well, one of the things you might want to do is listen to my videos. You say, well, listen to your videos. How's that going to help me sleep? You know, especially after you've heard it once, hopefully it won't be so stimulating to you and you'll be listening to something, hopefully, it's not very stressful that you can focus your mind on instead of your lack of sleep. And if you hear one of my talks again, hopefully it'll be edifying. You say, well, I'd rather listen to something else. Well, then listen to something else. But the key, listen to something familiar that's not stimulating that can help you rest. Now, as good as rest is, when Pastor Bradshaw segued away from his interview with Dr. Schwelt, he made a very important biblical point. And that is that, yes, rest is important, but we don't want to be sleeping all the time. By the way, if you're watching this program with a friend and they are snoring, you have perfect liberty right now to give them an elbow. Do not love sleep, lest you come to poverty. Open your eyes and you'll be satisfied with bread. We're trying to give you cutting edge information, practical information. So don't sleep during this program, at least not yet. Hear it one time. Then if you want to listen to it at bedtime and fall asleep, then you have perfect license to do so. Proverbs 26:14, as a door turns on its hinges, so does the lazy man on his bed. The message is, yes, you can sleep too much. You can be lazy. That's not the point of our message. But we do need sleep, and we do need more than daily rest. We actually have rhythms in our body that are not just daily rhythms, but we also have weekly rhythms. Many people have heard of the circadian rhythms. It comes from two roots, circa, meaning about, and dn or dm, referring to a day. But there are also circaseptan rhythms. Those are rhythms that are about a week in length. That's right, you have normal body rhythms that are weekly. We need a weekly rest as well as a daily rest. It's fascinating to me that the Bible identified as also needing of rest the earth, the land. Exodus 23 verses 10 and 11, you see it projected here. 6 days you shall sow your land. 6 days? No, 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its produce. But the seventh year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. In like manner you shall do with your vineyard and your olive grove. It's a very interesting program. You read more about it in Leviticus 25. But the idea is the land keeping a Sabbath every seventh year. The land was to rest. And this was something that God saw as needful to the land. Many of you know current agricultural practices, and that is farmers will rotate crops. We have farmers right near where we live. And last year, a field that's very close to us was planted in corn. This year it is planted in soybeans. So they're rotating the crops because given crops can deplete the soil. Soybeans are a legume. They can actually replenish the nitrogen in the soil. Some of you may know some of those basic things about agriculture. And I'm sure if I've gotten them wrong, one of you will let me know. But the point is crop rotation. So a more modern technique, but God recognized the need not to just grow the same crop on the land year after year. And you can see in those Sabbath, those 7-year Sabbath, principles that it provided for the poor, provided for livestock, for wild animals at least. And it was interesting. Pastor Bradshaw pointed out just what's happened when the earth has had some rest from the pollution, when things had closed down in many parts of the world, dramatic decreases in pollution throughout the world. Well, it seems as you look at this, these instructions, that God was trying to underscore something throughout history, and that is this pattern of work and rest. It applies to humans on daily, weekly, monthly, even annual basis, and it applied to the land as well. So what about spiritual rest? So we've been talking more about the physical end of things. A lot of people have said, especially with what's going on today, the world is in the midst of a true pandemic when it comes to stress. What can we do to curb the stress, to curb the anxiety, the turmoil? Where do we find meaning in life, especially when so much seems uncertain? Well, Jesus spoke these words. They're recorded in Matthew chapter 11. He says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So you say Jesus is promising rest. And it's interesting. We've looked at a scripture before in this series where God says basically the true rest, the true peace is found in connection with him. You will show me the path of life. In your presence, there is what? Fullness of joy. At your right hand, there are pleasures forevermore. So you say, okay, so God wants to be present with his people. This is his point. And you might remember that one of the names for Jesus was Emmanuel. That means God with us. So Jesus was actually displaying this aspect of God's character, that he wants to be with people. That's the picture that the Bible reveals. And that close relationship that God has always wanted for his creatures is seen at the very beginning of the Bible. And there's a very interesting thing that God created or instituted in the beginning. Let's just look at God's creative work. You see, God spoke and things came into being, but when it came to man, it says in God's image, humankind was created. It's very interesting that man and woman were not created by God just speaking. It's true. The creation in general, God just spoke and it occurred. And a lot of people, as they're listening to this, they say, this sounds so foreign to what we hear in the science books of today. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's just, we've been looking at the Bible, making a case for it, that it is logically consistent. And there is archaeology that demonstrates the Bible's historical authenticity, its accuracy. We've actually looked at things that say, hey, the Bible says to us really today that we've got to take it seriously. We've got to look at it seriously because it prophesied things hundreds of years in advance that came true. And there's no way to dismiss it, as many critics have done, saying that the prophecies of the Bible were all written after the fact. We showed internal evidence from archaeology and history earlier in this series that really nailed down the fact that the Bible is authoritative when it comes to when it was written. Okay? So, having said that, what about this creation picture? God speaks things into being, but when it comes to man and woman, God did something very different. In Genesis 2, verse 7, it says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." So we get this picture. Again, we're talking about rest being in God's presence, and we're seeing from the very beginning in the creation account that God is showing that he wants to be physically connected with people. He just doesn't speak man into existence. He actually shapes man. He forms man himself, and man is given life by God's own breath. In the creation account, again, man and woman, both created from the hand of God, both lovingly fashioned by the Creator, not merely spoken into existence. So you'd say, okay, so the Bible asserts that God has creative authority, that he cares about humanity, and basically, you would say the Bible gives us a sense of where we've come from and, if you will, where we're headed. So take those again at face value, because we want to really look at this question: what happens if you don't believe the Bible? And we've been trying to address this. A lot of people say, well, the Bible has just got a crazy creation story like all these other, foreign story by foreign, outside of the world of the Bible. And you say, so, what's the deal with it? Is it really hold up to intellectual scrutiny? And I will tell you, and I've read many creation accounts from many other cultures, and most of them are very, let me just give you some examples. One creation story is about how the earth hatched from a cosmic egg. Other creation stories about slaying of dragons and bodies being slain and blood pouring out and giving rise to the earth, and cosmic conflicts and battles that give rise to the creation of the earth. The Bible has none of this, this drama, if you will. It has a sublime dignity to the creation account. God speaks and things happen. And it really is very, very different than other creation stories throughout the world. So it begs, it's why is this so different? Because really, if a loving creator really did create the world, it sounds credible. And I'm speaking as someone who at one time in my life was an agnostic, okay? I'm saying the Bible really does speak with some credibility about God's creative authority. So this has to be put in contrast to the only other intellectually compelling model. And I admit, there's an intellectual consistency in the theory of evolution. So anyone who says, sometimes you hear people in Christian circles say, oh, anyone who believes in evolution, they park their brain at the door. No, evolution is intellectually compelling. Many intelligent people believe it. Do I think that's the best model for origins? I don't. And let's just talk about it a little bit. I've done whole seminars on creation science, and maybe we'll do that in a future iteration of an evening series. But it's very interesting to me. There is no scientist that I've ever met today who actually believes in Darwin's theory the way Darwin articulated it. In fact, we talked today about neo-Darwinism. So people have transcended beyond Darwin. So even though you hear, Darwin's theory of evolution, there's no way, nobody believes that evolution just progressed gradual changes over millions and millions of years. No one believes that. The reason why is there's not evidence for it. Even in the fossil record, no evidence for gradual changes. So very, very interesting. There's also a lot of evidence in nature that you look at it and you say, if you didn't have the Bible, you'd say, well, this does seem, to go along with much of what they're saying in the evolutionary model. But there's also some things that are just, I would say, as some people have said, they're death knells to Darwinism and neo-Darwinian theories. And let me just look at one example. Some of you see this picture of a mousetrap. If you don't see it, it's because you're listening to an audio or you're not getting the video feed. The concept here that you see illustrated and the caption on the picture is irreducible complexity. The mousetrap was used as the example by Michael Behe. Behe's a PhD chemist, wrote a book some years ago called Darwin's Black Box. And what Behe basically presented is that this concept of irreducible complexity undermines Darwinism. And the idea is there is absolutely no plausible way that complex biochemical systems could have just evolved by random chance. Now, I tell you all this, and I will let you know that Behe does believe in evolution of sorts. He believes in most of what evolution teaches. He just believes it couldn't have happened as an undirected process. He believes there had to be a God who directed it. Okay, now you might say, well, that's an interesting conclusion to come to. But the point is, Behe and other scientists who are looking at the evidence, they're saying there's absolutely no way that you can have a blood clotting system with numbers of different proteins and compounds, all in precise balance, that just evolved independently. How can you have a cardiovascular system that has receptors in your carotid arteries that are signaling to your heart and signaling to your brain, and that are connected to your kidney and your adrenal gland, that produces stress-related hormones if your blood pressure gets low? I mean, these are interconnected systems. Why is there a picture of a mousetrap? Behe's point is, if you use the analogy of evolution, could a mousetrap just evolve? You could say, well, something that has a wood base could, quote, evolve by, the way people think of evolution, or a spring could evolve, or, a latch could evolve. But how do all these things evolve with a purposeful way to combine together and make a system that is functional? Anyway, we can speak more about irreducible complexity, give you more examples if we do a creation science series sometime. But here's my point. My point is that there's scientific evidence, compelling scientific documentation that should lead most people who embrace evolution to think twice about just embracing even the neo-Darwinian model. And I would say that at the end of the day, you end up recognizing that there are Christians, serious Christians, honest Christians who are evolutionists, and honest Christians who believe the best explanation for how we got here is a literal reading of the Bible's creation account. To believe that there really was a God who created things by the word of his mouth, and in the case of humankind, by shaping humanity. So again, a lot of fertile ground for study, but let's just do this. If you're going to accept the Bible as it reads, let's just be honest. You can't accept the current theories of macroevolution the way they're stated. That there's just random chance over millions and millions of years, death and death and death, and that out of which grows higher and higher forms of life. It just does not stand up to the biblical account about the nature of sin and death and other things. Having said all that, that is not my great burden. My great burden is I understand where people are coming from. If you're saying this all sounds really weird, but let's just, with that aside, accept that God is creator. Whether you believe it like Behe, that, hey, all the evolutionary timelines are correct, and it's just that God was there watching over the process. My burden is not to convince you of one thing one way or the other tonight, but it's to recognize that from whatever model you come from, whether it's creationistic model that believes in a literal biblical creation, or do you say God was active in the process, which I think are the only two logical conclusions you can come to if you really honestly look at all the evidence. So you say that's a big thing to say, and kind of maybe an arrogant thing to say, because there's many atheists who believe in evolution, but I really don't think they are being honest with all the evidence. I'm not saying they're dishonest people. It may be the biases that they were raised with, the bad experiences they've had with religion, et cetera, et cetera. I can relate to all those things. And anyway, I would suggest to you that God actually anticipated that people would try to undermine his creative authority. And Pastor Bradshaw made this point in his series, Hope Awakens. I thought it was a great point, because what God does in the very beginning is he sets aside a day. He rests on the seventh day from his work. It's very interesting. The Bible makes it very clear that God doesn't get tired. He neither faints nor gets weary. So then why does God rest? Why does he set aside a day that he blesses, he sanctifies, he makes it holy? It seems, as you read through the scriptural account, God anticipated that people would try to forget, or would inadvertently forget, that he was the loving creator. And he put this memorial of creation, well, in place at the very beginning. So he creates this day of rest, this day of recovery, a day when we can get away from the stresses of the world. And it's actually amazingly all tied together at the very end of the Bible in God's last day gospel message. We've looked at this scripture before, Revelation 14, verse 6. John says, then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven. He had what? The everlasting gospel, the everlasting good news to preach to who? To everybody living on the earth, every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. And what is that angel saying? Often referred to as the first angel's message. That angel is saying, give glory to God, but not just give glory to God, fear him, reverence God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. It's a very, very interesting choice of words that this angel used, that John heard and that he recorded. Because what Revelation 14 is citing, it's actually quoting the Sabbath commandment. Right in the heart of the 10 commandments in Exodus 20, we read this: "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day." Heavens, earth, sea, and all that is in them. Look at what we see in Revelation 14: heaven, earth, sea, and springs of water, or fountains of waters. Some have said, why is it a little bit different in Revelation 14 if it's quoting Exodus 20? Many see in this expression of the springs of water a connection with also something in Genesis that spoke about the opening up of springs of water, springs of the deep during the time of the flood. Very interesting connection. The bottom line, God is the creator, and Revelation 14 and Exodus 20 calling us to worship God as creator. Very interesting question. You know, if you're wondering about all this and you're saying, hey, I've got friends who, you know, say this is all just a bunch of, you know, religious make-believe. Really interesting question to ask them: where did we come up with a 7-day week? Think about this for a minute. Just about everything else that we use to keep time based on is tied to something of astronomical significance, right? The day, 24 hours, where does that come from? That's the Earth rotating on its axis, right? Takes place over a span of 24 hours. What about the month? That is based on lunar cycles, moon cycles, right? The year, that's the Earth rotating around the sun. So if you look at all these ways we keep time, generally tied to things of astronomical significance, physical realities. But what about the week? There really is nothing in astronomy that points to a 7-day week. And in fact, not only the uniqueness, but the pervasiveness of the weekly cycle throughout the world indicates something that goes way back, I believe. We have these 7-day rhythms, and I believe they've been put there by a loving creator. God wanted us to take a day of rest after 6 days of work, a 7-day cycle. And just really imagine what would happen if the whole world really followed such a program. Now, I will tell you, it's interesting. There are people in the religious world that are looking at this, and they're seeing this evidence, and they're saying we need to legislate a day of rest for the world. I do not think that's the solution. And we'll look more at that question perhaps as we go through this series. But they're looking at evidence that it would be beneficial for the earth, beneficial for humankind. And I would agree with all those things because God made us that way. Now, what's interesting, though, is the Sabbath commandment was actually put on tables of stone. It's an interesting contrast. You know, in the world, civil governments try to enact laws that they enforce through the power of the state, through police, etc. But God doesn't force our will, but he educates us. And the Sabbath commandment is interesting. It starts with the word remember, not with the word or the words thou shalt not. Many of the other commandments start that way. So what does this mean? Remember the Sabbath day. God is speaking this on Mount Sinai. That's the context. The children of Israel in bondage in Egypt. They're led out of bondage. They go through the Red Sea miraculously. They're now in the wilderness, and God is speaking to them from Sinai. He says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor, do all your work. He speaks about how the Sabbath is to apply to everybody in the land. But the operative word is remember. Very interesting. It suggests that God's people knew about it before Sinai, right? If he's speaking from Sinai, saying, remember the Sabbath, if they've never heard of it, that wouldn't make any sense, would it? So the evidence suggests that the Sabbath commandment came from Eden God's true people had kept it ever since creation week, long before there ever was a Hebrew, long before there ever was an Exodus. And we could look at many other references to that. And it's interesting, the Sabbath is never called the Sabbath of the Jews. I know some Christians want to label the seventh-day Sabbath that way. The seventh-day Sabbath, which, by the way, biblically is from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, that has been kept for centuries by the Jewish nation, because that was the day that God set aside from the beginning, and that's the day they kept in the Old Testament, and that's the day that they keep to this day. It was never, though, just the Jewish Sabbath. The Sabbath was put into effect in the very beginning. Now, it's interesting. The Sabbath is put into place by God, the same God who said, "Thou shalt not kill." It's interesting to me that people want to say the Sabbath is just for the Jews, the seventh-day Sabbath, but they don't want to say it's only Jews that shouldn't take life, shouldn't murder people. They would say, well, that applies to everyone. Adultery, that's not a good thing for anybody, et cetera, et cetera. You understand. Thou shalt not steal. Nobody thinks it's good for people just to take off with their goods. Now, you may find an unusual person who may want to defend that, but by and large, we would say all the 10 commandments, except, some people would say, the fourth commandment, the one that said remember, we should remember. But the one that says remember, we should forget about because it's just for the Jews. Really doesn't make sense, right? Logically, not very consistent. God calls his people from the beginning to a blessing. Think about it. What kind of God would give a blessing at the beginning of creation and then would take it away in the 21st century? Like we don't need it today, like we don't need a day of rest. Now, a lot of people in the Christian world say, hey, I don't keep the Sabbath because I'm not a legalist. Well, you could keep the Sabbath legalistically. It's true. In Jesus' day, there were people doing that. The scribes and the Pharisees thought somehow they were meriting God's favor by keeping his law. This was not the purpose of the law. If you read the law as it was given in the books of Moses, perfect example in the book of Deuteronomy, time and time again, God says, I'm giving you these laws so that it will be well with you, so that you'll prosper in the land. I'm showing you the happiest way to live. God was giving them a blessing, okay? And it's a blessing that still stands for today. By the way, it's interesting. Not only was the Sabbath not to be something that we could boast about, which the Jews twisted in the days of Jesus, you'll realize, it was a sign that God was the one that sanctified us. See, Sabbath means rest. So think about this, that this is not logically consistent to say, well, I don't keep the Bible's Sabbath. I don't set aside the seventh-day Sabbath because that would be legalistic. No, the whole idea of the Sabbath is what? It's you're not working, you're resting, you're trusting in what God does for you. So to say the Sabbath is a work is missing the whole idea of what the Sabbath is. The Sabbath is basically saying I'm trusting in God as my creator and as my redeemer. Because when you read why the Sabbath was given in Deuteronomy 5, it was also given because God redeemed us. So Sabbath, it's a sign that God is the one who makes us holy, not ourselves. We don't work to make ourselves holy. God is our creator. He's our redeemer. And Jesus himself kept the seventh-day Sabbath. In Luke chapter 4, verse 16, we find that Jesus' custom was to go into the synagogue, the place of worship. We would call it analogous to the church today. Only one temple in Jerusalem, but there were synagogues throughout the land of Israel, and that's where Jesus found himself on the Sabbath. So what day is the Sabbath? Well, I told you it's from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, but don't take my word for it. Many of you have studied this out. Probably the best passage to nail this down if you have questions yourself or friends that might have questions is Luke, the end of Luke 23 and into the beginning of Luke 24. It's talking about the crucifixion of Jesus. Jesus dies. I think most people realize on what's typically called Good Friday. He dies. He's taken down off the cross ultimately. But it's interesting. It says that day was the preparation. The Jews called the seventh day the Sabbath. They called the sixth day of the week the preparation day. We would count that Jewish day today from sundown Thursday to sundown Friday. That was the preparation day. So the preparation day, Good Friday, is when Jesus dies. He's taken down off the cross, and it says there, you may not be able to read that whole thing if you've got my image in the upper right-hand corner, but it says, and the Sabbath drew near. And so they put Jesus in the tomb on Friday, the end of the day on Friday, and Jesus rests in the tomb on Sabbath, and so do all his disciples. They all understood that they should be following God's principle of a Sabbath rest. Everybody rests. Jesus resting in the tomb. The disciples resting on Sabbath. And then what happens? Luke 24, verse 1, on the first day of the week, every Christian knows the first day of the week is what? Sunday. That's the day that Jesus what? Rose. We call it today, many Christians at least call it, Easter Sunday. So Jesus rises on Sunday. So look at the picture here. Preparation day is Friday. First day of the week when Jesus is resurrected is Sunday. The seventh day of the week, Saturday, is the Sabbath. From sundown Friday to sundown Saturday is when the Sabbath was kept. It is a memorial of redemption. Jesus rests in the tomb. And like I said, if you read Deuteronomy 5, where the 10 commandments are repeated, it connects God giving us the Sabbath in connection, not just with creation, but also with redemption. And you can read it there in Deuteronomy 5:15. Of course, not read it right now because I only showed it to you for about a second. Sabbath is a sign, creation, redemption, sanctification. And what's exciting about it, the connection with rest, basically, we're saying to Jesus, we're trusting you. We're trusting you, the one who made us, the one who saved us, the one who gave us power to live a holy life. And we're going to take a day off as you asked us to do it. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I did not grow up keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. When I first heard about this, I guess there were some things that may have sounded kind of good, but actually it sounded like a nuisance. I'm just being honest with you. How could I take a day off? I'm busy. I have a lot happening. How could I take a whole day off? But God convicted me. He said, I want you, David, to keep this day. I really am asking people to do that today. And so I started doing it. It seemed very difficult at first. But as I was doing it, I started to realize that I needed that seventh-day rest. What I hadn't been doing, I'd been missing out. I was under a lot more stress, and I found that God helped me as a result of that to deal with stress in life, to be more even-keeled, to have a better zest for continuing my work week because I had taken a day off. If you don't think all of that nails it down for you, if you say, I still think, Sunday is the Bible Sabbath, well, just look at languages throughout the world. Many, many languages have retained the word Sabbath in their word for Saturday. Just look at this example here. Many of you know Spanish, sábado. You can see other languages there. Many, many languages, you see the word or the term Sabbath in there. Now, of course, Saturday is from Saturn, the god Saturn. But even it, you might say, well, why was that particular god connected? It has a sound kind of like Sabbath, or you get the picture. So some people say, hey, what difference does it make? I'm going to just celebrate creation on Sunday. Well, how would you feel if our country said we're going to now start celebrating the 4th of July on September 1st? You'd say, hey, I could handle that. I like September for the holiday better. I'd rather be shooting fireworks off when it's a little cooler than in July. Well, let's take the analogy one step further. How about if everyone in your workplace, let's say you're a student in your school, we're going to celebrate everyone's birthday on March 15th. Now think this through. Unless you were born on March 15th, wouldn't you feel like they really were not remembering your birthday? And in fact, such a change would actually cause people to forget about your true birthday. If you really want to remember the day that God set aside, keep the seventh-day Sabbath. Jesus' example was to keep his Father's commandments. And it really shows our love for Jesus. It's not some kind of work that we do to earn God's favor. Jesus instituted the Sabbath. It did not change after his death. We could look at multiple texts in the book of Acts where his followers, after his death, kept the seventh-day Sabbath. On the Sabbath, they're meeting. On the Sabbath, they're in the synagogue. On the Sabbath, they're by the river. On the Sabbath, the Gentiles are asking for them to preach. On the Sabbath, on the Sabbath, on the Sabbath. That was the meeting day for the early church and for even the converts to the early church. So, if you wanted one last passage as we're closing up, just remember the Sabbath was to be kept after Jesus' death. I remind you of Matthew 24:20. Destruction of Jerusalem was not going to take place till 70 AD. Jesus asked his followers to pray that they wouldn't have to flee during the winter or on the Sabbath. It was still to be a special day of rest long after Jesus' death. And in Isaiah 66, we find that the Sabbath, the day of rest, this new heavens and new earth, there will be a Sabbath that will still be kept in eternity. Okay? So hopefully that gives you some encouragement that not only can you benefit from resting from certain foods, but you can also benefit from resting from work. Well, hopefully we'll have some interesting dialogue. If you've been tuning in on Facebook or on YouTube, we're going to switch right now. It is just after 8 o'clock. We try to limit our meetings to an hour, but then we give a chance for you to interact, for you to dialogue, and we do that only through the Zoom platform. So what I'm doing right now is I'm navigating to some of those other platforms, and I'm going to go ahead and open up our Facebook and our YouTube pages. And if you're on Facebook and YouTube, that means we'll be concluding the presentation on those platforms. And what it also means is that by virtue of that, if you want to join us, you'll need to go to Zoom. Now, the way to do it is go to my website, compasshealth.net, and go compasshealth.net/2020journey. That's what you need, compasshealth.net/2020journey. And if you go to that, what will you do? You'll actually have an amazing opportunity. You will see the link there where you can actually come to Zoom. I'm not going to give you all the keys and stuff right now. That wouldn't be too useful. You can just click on the link that's provided for you there, okay? So that's what we'll be doing. So if you're on YouTube, just letting you know, I'm just about to end the YouTube feed. So remember, if you want to join us, if you've got questions, go to us on Zoom, and you'll find that by going to compasshealth.net/2020journey. You'll see all the information about how to link up with us on Zoom, as well as other platforms if you want to join us next week as well. If you want to watch archive shows, all that material's there. So for all of you on YouTube, thanks for joining us, and that will end the stream on YouTube. Thank you. Now, for those of